What's going on, everybody? I'm Jeff Carpenter with Ready Light Media and Next Level Workshops, and you are probably wondering why in a photography tutorial about studio photography, I'm sitting in my living room. Well, I want to talk to you about my whole process with pre-production, and believe it or not, it a lot of times starts sitting right here in this chair. So what I use is a program called Satellite 3D. So I want to kind of jump into that program, show you my whole process with my pre-production, and then how I can bring that into the studio so that way we have some assets that really get us there a lot quicker, so we're not wasting time with our subjects, with our clients, with our talent in the studio, and we can kind of work out all the kinks and details inside of this program. So this program is called Satellite 3D. It's by Elixr Software, and it is a really amazing tool that is going to allow us to build a whole set inside of a studio. Now with this one here, I've just kind of got a generic, room here, and you know, you can build that out however you want. You can have it to the exact specifications of your studio. I don't have time to get into that today, but I want to just show you kind of, I'm going to build a set and then we're going to bring it into the studio and we're going to shoot it, and I'm going to show you this whole process from start to finish. So right now we've got just kind of a blank screen over here on the right. This is going to be what our camera is seeing. So let's go ahead and bring in a model. I know I'm going to be working with my friend Allie, who is blonde. So let's bring in the one that kind of looks similar to her. And I'm just going to angle her a little bit towards the camera. And one other thing I'm going to do as well is I know I'm going to be shooting this on my psych wall, on my kind of infinity wall. So I'm going to bring in a psych wall into this studio space here. So I'm going to click on Helper, and it's called Cove. So I'm going to bring this in, kind of put it in this corner. Now we notice that it is facing the wrong way. So I'm just going to go over down here to yaw. I could kind of just drag this and turn it if I wanted to, but I know it's going to be exactly 90 degrees flipped around. And let's just kind of place that into the corner. Make sure it doesn't have to be perfect. Mine's not right up against the wall, so let's just put that there. Now this is also still the incorrect size. So the top, basically that's ceiling height. So my whole psych wall is 10 by 10 by 10. So we'll do 10 foot there. The width is 10 feet as well, and the length is also 10 feet. So now we've got a representative size of the backdrop that we're going to be shooting on. And radius, you can change this. Basically, this is the kind of the radius of the curve itself. Mine is a 24-inch radius, so we'll go ahead and change that to 2 feet. And now we've got a nice psych wall there. I don't plan on ever moving this again, so what I can do is over here in the side, I can just click on this little lock icon, and that's going to lock that where I cannot move that. So, you don't want to accidentally move things around. So let's go ahead and bring in a light, because right now, we've got a model, we've got our psych wall there, we can't see anything because we have no lights. So let's go ahead and just bring in a bare bulb strobe here. Now by default, all of these lights are going to be 500 watt second flashes here, and it'll tell you what watt second it's at based on the power on this slider over here. Now, I did go ahead and build out, I shoot with Profoto, so I've got Profoto A2s, I've got Profoto B10Xs and B10X Pluses. So I know that for this particular light, I'm probably going to want to use a B10X Plus, which is a 500 watt second light. And we can just go ahead and have that one there. Now we know when we get into the studio, we can just kind of pull that exact light, and it's gonna work really seamlessly for us. So right now we can start to see, what we have. Let's go ahead and change the pose of this model. There are a bunch of pre-done poses here we can do. Let's just pick, this one looks nice right here. You can also go into, if you want to get really detailed, you can go into the posing mode, which basically allows you to manipulate this model however you see fit. Let's say I want her head chin down just a touch or something like that. You can do that. And again, there is so much you can do with this program that I don't have time to get into today, but I just kind of want to show you how I use it as a pre-production tool. So let's get out of posing mode here. All our lights show back up. Now, for this particular shoot, I am going to play a little bit with shadows and shapes, and I'm going to be using V-flats from V-flat World to do that. So V-flat World V-flats are not, you know, they don't come in this program, but I know the size of them. So I'm going to go ahead and come back over to this helper panel, and I'm going to drag in a white reflector. Now this one looks huge. It's much bigger than the V-flat World ones are. And this is kind of your standard, what would have been, you know, like a 4x8 panel that is a standard V-flat. The V-flat World ones are a little bit smaller. So we're going to basically just manipulate the size over here on the left. And because I know I'm going to be playing with the kind of the angle of the top part of the V-flat, I'm actually going to create 4 separate panels, and I'll show you why here in a second. So the V-flat World V-flats are 40x40 panels, kind of 4 of them all stitched together. So that would be 3.33 feet. And on the length here, I'm also going to do 3.33 feet. That's going to basically create a 40-inch by 40-inch square here. We're going to kind of drag that into where we think we want it. And I'm going to hold down Option, and that basically copied it. And I'm going to turn this to 90 degrees because that's about where I'm going to want it. And let's just kind of bring this in, centered up on the corner of this psych wall here. Now, that is just the bottom part, right? So we need the top parts as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of hold down Option again, drag a little bit. I'm going to go over here to height because I know that bottom panel was 3.33 feet. I'm going to say I want this one to be 3.33 feet off the ground. Now we've got the top part. And same thing here. Copy it. 3.33. Now we have essentially obviously V-flats are white on one side, black on the other. For this instance, that doesn't really matter. So we have our V-flat, right? Now what I want to do is I want to start, you know, kind of playing with the angle of the top parts because they're foldable V-flats, they don't have to always be straight up. So you can kind of angle them down and kind of play with that if you want to play with the shadows like I want to do. So with this one, we're going to go ahead and deal with pitch here. So pitch is basically angle. Now, if I pitch it here, that goes down like that. So we can kind of play around with that. Let's go ahead and put it about 20. So you can kind of like play with it and just kind of eyeball it, or you can type in exact numerical values over here as well. Now, because this one's going to be pitched the other way, we're going to need to go this way. So let's go 20 degrees on that side as well. Now, obviously, the camera is in the wrong spot because it's here. So if we bring this back here, we're like, okay, great, that looks fine, but we're still seeing the actual V-flat here. So what I'm going to do for this shot, I'm actually going to bring the camera in front of the V-flats. I'm going to swing it around here a little bit, bring it in front. I'm going to bring it down a little bit. Now, you notice if you look right above my cursor, there are numbers. So those basically are numbers that tell me how high or low the camera is. And it is locked on to my subject. So if I come up, it's going to kind of stay locked in position. We'll kind of put it right about there, we'll say. Now, right now, the shadow's kind of going straight over here, which is kind of a fun little look, but I'm also going to drag this, this little square here is the focus point of the camera. I'm just going to drag it over her eye. And now I can play with my key light here and start bringing this around to, you know, get that V or that, you know, kind of that shadow shape more in the center of the frame. For this shot, I definitely want to kind of play around with some symmetry. Now, you'll see up at the top here, you know, we're seeing kind of the angle at the top of the V-flat. If I wanted to basically raise the shadow, what I need to do is I need to lower my light. Same thing in the opposite direction. If I raise my light up, the shadow disappears almost altogether. So you can kind of play with the height of the shadow by moving your light or your camera up and down. So we'll kind of put it there. We'll have it extend just beyond the background. I'm going to bring this up just a touch. So I'm going to do my pitch on my camera. So this is a really great starting point. Now for this shot, I also know I'm going to be playing with the color red. So everything is going to be red. So let's go ahead and bring in and change the outfit of my model here. I believe she's going to be wearing a hat as well. So we'll kind of bring the, all these are all different hairstyles here. So we can bring the one that has the hat. The hat hopefully will be red. So let's go ahead and change that to the color red. And she will be wearing kind of a dress. Again, I believe we're not sure exactly what she's going to be wearing until we get to set, but this is kind of what I had envisioned. So with this, we'll go down here and just kind of make it a solid pattern and change it to red. Now we've got a nice red outfit, but the rest of the frame is kind of, it's still neutral colors. So let's go ahead and bring in a couple more lights. And we'll go over here to mono lights. Just to keep things simple, I'm going to go ahead and do a couple just shoot through umbrellas, just kind of small shoot through umbrellas. And I can either drag this one over or I can copy this one. So I'll just copy this one. And by default, all of these lights are going to kind of lock onto the subject. But if you ever want to turn that off, there's this little bullseye here. You can just uncheck that and then you can move that light independently. All right, so these ones I'm going to be using Profoto A2s. So I'm going to click on those, make sure I have those. So that when I bring them into the studio, I can just pull those lights. Now that's looking a little, you know, it's got more exposure on here, but what are we playing with? We're playing with red. So let's go ahead and throw a primary red gel on both of these lights. And we're starting to get, you know, some color, but it's really desaturated. Now, if I turn off this key light, that is extremely saturated. So what that means, that's telling me that all of the desaturation is coming from this key light here. So if I turn that back on, we can start to see it's getting really desaturated. And I can actually click on this, and this program will tell me everywhere where this light is bouncing, is essentially bouncing off walls. And these walls are probably, they're white walls, at least in my studio, they're white walls. So I know that that light is basically spreading out, it's bouncing off all my walls, and then basically desaturating this, this kind of the edges of the frame, which I don't want. So one way we can do that, we can basically just change the modifier of this key light. So if I put a grid on there, which would be kind of my first go-to, you know, option, that's gonna basically kill too much light. So I'm actually gonna use a snoot, which is just the same thing. It still narrows that beam of light, but it's gonna be able to kind of throw that light a little bit further. So let's go ahead and click on a snoot. Now, still, even though, you know, it's not cutting back as much light as you know, maybe a grid would, it still is cutting back light because you're putting something in front of that light and not as much light is reaching my subject. So now I have to increase the power of my light. And what this is doing, if I turn this off, completely red frame, right? If I turn that on, we're starting to get neutral skin tones because basically the power of the light coming from my key light is overpowering that red and just creating a somewhat natural skin tone. It is still a little on the red side, which we can then kind of, I hate to say it, but we can fix that in post. But we're pretty good here. Let's say I'm at full power on this light. Let's say I wanted to shoot at a relatively quicker pace and I'm not, I don't want to have to wait for my light to recycle. What I can do is I can actually, let's just bump this up to ISO 400. So that's 2 stops up. So I can basically bring this down to 8. And I can bring these ones down to 4. And now we have essentially the same, the same exposure, but we increase our our ISO, so we had to bring the light power down. We could have done that with aperture as well, but we're at f4. I'll probably be using a 24-105 lens. So yep, see, it's already here. So that being said, you can manipulate a lot more things within this program, but let's say we like where this is. I actually kind of want, I think, one more stop of light on my key light here. Maybe not a whole stop, maybe a half a stop. That gets us to a nice white background there. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click this little camera icon up at the top right corner, and that's going to take a snapshot. So we can come over here to view, and this is low res preview. So I'm going to render this shot out. And what that's going to do is that's going to render it out to essentially a high quality image, which then once this is done rendering out, I can come up here to the export panel. So just give it a couple seconds. So we're going to come up here to the export panel, and now we can export this as a PDF. So this is really, really amazing. So basically what we can do here is you can kind of move this around if you want a kind of slightly different view, just to kind of give whoever. The idea for this is basically you can hand this PDF off to an assistant. They can have this entire, scene set up for you before you arrive on set, or just as a reference for yourself. So then you can kind of export this as, again, as a PDF, as a JPEG. You can kind of do just a couple different things there. All of these references that you have are going to be, invaluable as far as being able to recreate this shot. And it's not necessarily meant to be, this is going to be exactly what it's going to look like, but this is supposed to get you, I would say, 90% of the way there. Now, another thing that's kind of cool about this is, let's say we want to test out what different modifiers maybe on these red lights would be. So I know I've got a couple, 3-foot octaboxes. So let's switch it out and switch these both to 36-inch or 3-foot octas. And we can already start to see it does change the look a little bit, because soft boxes, octaboxes are going to kind of have more of an edge, and they're not going to throw light everywhere like a shoot throw umbrella would. So you might want that look. Maybe we want to increase the power a little bit on that, just to kind of, we'll bring these both up one stop and just kind of see where that is. So now we can kind of play with that. Now both of these, let's just go render all snapshots. So we can kind of see it does change it a little bit. It's minimal, but you can play around with different lighting and kind of really build your entire setup. Again, I'm sitting on a chair in my living room. I could be watching Netflix right now. Basically, this allows you to not waste your time in the studio. This gets you really, really close. So now that we've got, what we want, after this is done rendering here, let's go here. I still think I'm going to want to use probably the shoot through umbrella. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this. I'm going to export this as a PDF. Let's just call this red shoot, and I'm going to save this. I'm just going to save this on my desktop because, just kidding. I'm going to save it in my documents. We'll save that there. Now I know where I can go find it. That's there. I can print that off, or I can maybe put it on an iPad or something like that. But the point is I have reference for this whole shoot. So now we can go ahead and jump into the studio and actually shoot this thing. All right, so we're in the studio now. So it's time to set up and get everything ready for our model to get here. So I've got my pre-production on my screen here. I could print it out, but I've just got it on my screen so I can take a look at it. And again, this is meant to get you about 80 to 90% of the way there. It's probably not gonna be perfect. We're probably still gonna have to tweak it a little bit, but this is at least gonna get us to where we can start setting everything up. I'm gonna start with the V-flat, and with that, I'm gonna need a couple of C-stands. I'm gonna show you why I'm using the C-stands in a second, but I'll go ahead and bring these over. I'm just gonna have these set up for a little bit. And basically what these are gonna do is these are gonna allow me to kind of prop that V-flat up. And the reason why I'm using these, like these ones, I mean, you can use anything, but I like these C-stands because they actually have this little rubber piece that is not gonna damage the V-flat once I lean it on there. If you do it on a metal part, you might poke a hole through it or something like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of get these where I think they're gonna work out. And again, I want that rubber piece up. Make sure these are tight and not going anywhere. And we'll just kind of put these off to the side here. All right, so now I've got my V-flat here. And the whole point of this is to create a V. So I'm just gonna kind of have this here. And what I'm actually gonna do, which my program did not prepare me for, is I'm gonna put a little sandbag here to make it so this thing doesn't move. Because I'm not gonna see that side of it at all, so it doesn't really matter. And I know I did shoot this into a psych wall, but you can see there's a carpet here. I know I'm not gonna be shooting full body, so I don't really need to actually move that or anything. I have the carpet there just so when I walk on it, it's not actually, you know, I'm not getting footprints all over it. And we may need to move this a little bit. So I'm kind of putting it roughly in the area of where I had it, or where I think I had it in the pre-visualization. But the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put the camera up. So normally I would have my camera on my little stand over here, but I know that I'm gonna need this camera in front of this V-flat, because if I had it back there, the shadow of the camera would likely be, you know, in the shot from the main light that's gonna be back there. So I'm actually gonna have my camera right in front here. And then I'm gonna run a tether cable over to my computer so I can control it and actually trigger the camera from my computer that's wherever I decide that's gonna be. So I'm just gonna not plug this in for now. I'm actually just gonna have this kind of sit here for a second. And now let's go ahead and put together our main key light here. So I basically want this just kind of here, angled straight at that corner there. And I did mention that I'm going to be using a Profoto B10X Plus and a snoot. And the snoot is basically on there to narrow that beam of light, but still be able to throw quite a bit of light out there. Because if I didn't have that, it would bounce off the V-flat and just bounce off all of my walls and overexpose my image. So I can start by turning this light on a little bit. I can turn my modeling light on so I can start to see what this is doing. And now we can start bringing in our other lights. So I've got two more stands over here. And these are gonna be the lights that are creating my red color. So I've got some Profoto A10s or A2s rather. And I'm gonna put a shoot through umbrella on here. So I've already got my click red gels on there. And the whole point of this light here is just to throw a ton of red light everywhere. And that's why I'm gonna be using a shoot through umbrella. Open this up over here. And stick that through. Turn this guy on. And do the same thing over on the other side. Now I'm probably gonna have to move these lights when my model gets here so she can actually get through here. Now normally I would have my lights all independently from each other, but in this case I know these ones, these kind of red, we'll call them background lights, are gonna be, they're always gonna be the same. So I'm just gonna keep them both on group B, so that way I can, every time I don't have to change them individually. But what I should be able to do is dial in the setting exactly how it should be. So I can look at my screen over here, and these are Profoto A2s at 4, which should be, so let's dial this down to 4. I think my computer is in an all right spot, so I'm gonna go ahead and plug in my, the reason why I've got this plugged in here is I am now able to open up Capture One, and what I can do here is go into live view. Obviously, I'm not seeing anything right now because there's no model there. I am also not at my correct setting. So my ISO on my camera currently is 640. I'm shooting at ISO 400 on this. So I can control that either from my camera or I can control my ISO from my computer. So let's go ahead and get our model in here. And once she gets here, we'll go ahead and throw her in front of the camera and we'll go ahead and start shooting. All right, so now that we've got everything set up, Allie's here and we are basically just gonna start shooting. But one thing I did wanna talk about, I did notice a couple things in some of the test shots I took. So I did tweak the setup from the original pre-visualization. So one thing that I did was I brought this a little bit closer to the backdrop. I was able to move this light a little further away. That kind of helped just get a little bit of a crisper line. I also feathered my umbrellas a little bit away, kind of more towards the wall. That's gonna do a couple of things. It's gonna reduce some of the shadow from those. And then it's also gonna not spill as much light onto that kind of area in the middle, so that way we can get a more neutral skin tone. So let's go ahead and dive in. We'll take a couple shots. We'll see where we are. If we need to make any tweaks from there, we can. But let's go ahead and see what we have. So what I want to do here is I do have my lights on my phone. So my camera's up in front here. My triggers where I would normally control the light is also up there. So I've got the ability to control my lights from my phone. So I'm going to turn off my key light here. Just check the red lights. And we've got just a nice kind of overall red, and obviously we don't have any shape or color on her. So I'm gonna turn my key light on and just have that. I'm gonna turn those red lights off. And now we have the ability to turn all of those on and get the kind of shot that we had originally visualized. All right, and what I'm gonna do too is, as you noticed from this last shot, she was facing the wrong way because she has no idea when I'm taking the photo. Normally I'd be up there, we can kind of see each other and work, but what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna count off, which I normally don't like to do, but it's gonna help her a ton in this situation. Are you ready? All right, and 3, 2, 1. Love it. All right, we'll do a couple more with that, and ready, 3, 2, and 1. And 3, 2, and 1. And one other thing that I actually did want to mention that is a slight change from our original pre-production was the camera setting. So originally I had my ISO at 400 and my light powered down a little bit. And the reason for that was to allow me to shoot a little bit quicker. But once we got into this, I've got my video light here. We've got some ambient light in this scene. So I actually brought my ISO down to 100 and then brought my light power up to kind of compensate for that. And I think it's actually okay because we are trying to get some movement in the shot. So I'm not just like, up. I'm actually able to kind of take my time, get the shot we want and get everything we need. And having that 1 second or so in between shots where my lights are recycling is totally fine. But again, this was just a video that kind of shows the value of a program like Satellite 3D and how I use it in my pre-production process. So if you have any questions about that or this shot, reach out to me at Ready Light Media on Instagram or at nextlevelworkshops.com, and I'll see you next time.